There's a moment no one talks about, the second after someone questions your worth, not with facts. With tone, with doubt, a smirk, a sideways jab, a pause that tells the room, you're not who you think you are, and in that breath, you react. You explain, you correct, you try to hold the image together, but something cracks, not because they were right, but because they made you flinch. You felt the need to be understood, to protect your name, to prove you're not the villain in someone else's story. But here's the truth. The moment you defend yourself, you step into their frame, and from that point on, you're not leading the room anymore, you're following their narrative. That's not self-respect, that's emotional debt, and they just made you pay it publicly. You want to know why some people never get challenged again. It's not their resume, it's not their words, it's the silence they weaponize. You've felt that power before, the kind that walks in, doesn't explain, and still shifts the air. So here's what we're about to unpack: how to never be forced into defense again, how to flip power in stillness, and how to become the person no one dares to press twice, not because they like you, but because something about you feels untouchable. Most people are taught the same lie, that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, they'll finally understand you, that if you show them your heart, they'll stop trying to rip it apart. But let's be honest, how many times have you explained yourself only to watch the other person twist your words even tighter? How many conversations ended not with clarity, but with you exhausted, trying to prove what you already know is true? They weren't looking for truth, they were looking for reaction, and you gave it to them every time you said, "Oh, that's not what I meant," or "you misunderstood." You thought you were fixing the problem, but you weren't. You were stepping deeper into a game they already set up, because once you defend yourself, you're not in control anymore. You've told them, without meaning to, "I care what you think. I need your approval to stay whole." And that is blood in the water. In power dynamics, defense is not clarity, it's submission. It's saying, "Please don't misunderstand me," which is another way of saying, "Please don't take my power." The truth is colder, but it's clean. You don't need to be understood, you need to be unreadable, because when people can't predict you, they tread carefully, they hesitate, they guess. And guesswork creates distance, it creates mystery, and mystery protects what explanation destroys. Every word you offer becomes something they can twist. Every sentence is a new thread for them to pull. But when you go quiet, when you hold your gaze, when you don't react at all, you turn the spotlight back on them. They begin to doubt themselves, their voice wavers, their confidence shrinks, and suddenly, the story isn't about what you did, it's about how calm you are while they unravel. This is the strategy most people never learn, because they were taught to earn respect through likability, through clarity, through being the bigger person. But power doesn't work that way. Power doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't raise its voice to be heard. It waits until the room leans in, and in that silence, you've already won. So next time someone tries to bait you, pause, let them speak, let the crowd watch, and when the silence arrives, don't rush to fill it, let it stretch, let it burn, because the one who holds still the longest holds the frame. His name rarely shows up in the headlines, but if you look behind some of the most pivotal political shifts in the last 2 decades, you'll find him there, not in the center, but just behind the curtain, watching. Alexander Cade, a strategist, a presence, a man who knew how to win without ever being seen as the one pulling strings. When Cade walked into a room, people stopped talking, not because of who he was, but because of what he never said. He didn't interrupt, he didn't jump to defend, he didn't argue. He simply watched, and that silence, it wasn't passive. It was precision. Cade understood something most leaders still don't. The person who reacts first loses control of the frame. The one who remains still owns the room. There's a story they whisper in Washington. Cade was once accused publicly of sabotaging a major campaign. It was a live panel, national broadcast. A senator turned to him and said, "You were behind that leak, weren't you?" The cameras were rolling. The audience leaned in. Everyone waited for a denial, a defense, an excuse. But Cade didn't blink. He didn't speak. He turned slightly, looked past the senator, and offered the smallest smile, not mockery, not guilt, just knowing. And in that instant, the senator flinched, stumbled over his next words. The audience noticed. They shifted, not because Cade was proven innocent, but because he refused to play the game. This is Cade's law. Stillness is status. When you hold still in the storm, you tell the world, "I am not moved by your chaos." People don't fear noise. They fear quiet. They fear the man who absorbs an attack and doesn't react, because that silence forces them to question everything. What does he know? Why isn't he angry? What will he do next? Cade weaponized that question mark. He never needed to raise his voice, never needed to chase rumors. He understood that when you don't give them an answer, they fill in the blanks with something far more powerful, respect or fear, sometimes both. And that is the most dangerous kind of control, the kind you never have to explain. Because it's not granted by them, it's built by you, brick by brick, moment by moment, silence by silence. There's a shift that happens the moment you stop defending yourself and start using their accusations against them. It's not about being cruel, it's about knowing the terrain, understanding that people don't always speak from truth. They speak from insecurity, and if you're calm enough, you'll see it. Someone calls you arrogant. Don't protest, don't soften your tone, smile gently and say, "Interesting that confidence makes you uncomfortable." And now they're not analyzing you. They're analyzing themselves. They wanted to provoke guilt. What they got was a mirror, and in that mirror, they see their own frustration, their own envy, their own need to control how you show up in the world. Most people don't realize this. But every accusation comes with a hidden message, and it's rarely about you, it's about them. When they say, "You're manipulative," they're often saying, "I couldn't get what I wanted from you." When they say, "You're fake," they're usually saying, "You didn't give me the version of you I felt entitled to." When they say, "You act like you're better than others," what they mean is, "You're not playing small enough to make me feel big." And here's the move: don't defend, invert. Turn their criticism into a confession. Let them reveal more than they meant to. Let them sit in the awkward echo of their own tone. Because when you do this, you don't just protect yourself, you reposition the spotlight. And suddenly, they're the one trying to explain. Cade understood this like an art form. He once said to a younger advisor, "When they accuse you of being cold, tell them, not everyone needs to speak to feel everything." It wasn't just a line. It was a principle. You don't argue for warmth. You let your stillness speak its own language. This is the quiet reversal, the power move that doesn't need force. It just needs clarity and emotional restraint. Because when you no longer chase innocence, you begin to create presence, and in that space, you become someone people can't categorize, can't label, can't control. They don't know whether to respect you or fear you, so they do both, and that is exactly where you want to be. You walk into a meeting, 12 people at the table. Someone makes a joke, light on the surface, but sharp underneath. You always have the boldest ideas, they say, with a smile that cuts just a little too wide. Everyone chuckles, eyes glance toward you. This is the moment. Most people lean forward. They clarify. They say, "Well, what I meant was," or worse, they laugh along, trying to neutralize the tension, but in doing so, they confirm it. They show the room the hit landed. They hand over control of the frame. Here's what Cade would do. He would pause, let the air settle, let the silence stretch, and then, maybe, he'd say, "You seem emotional today." A simple, flat, neutral. A quiet redirection. Now the attacker flinches. They fumble to clarify. The attention shifts, because suddenly, the room isn't watching you. They're watching them, and that's the secret most people miss. In every social interaction, there is a frame. A set of rules that determines who's on trial and who holds the gavel, and the person who speaks second. often holds the gavel. Cade built entire negotiations on this principle at a private equity summit in Boston. He was cornered by a rival who said, "I'm not sure your last fund really hit the mark." The tone was polite, the subtext wasn't. Cade leaned back, waited, didn't respond. The rival kept talking, filled the silence with more jabs. Then more justifications, and just like that, the room watched him spiral. Cade hadn't said a word, but he had just rewritten the power dynamic, because stillness, when delivered with presence, makes people talk to themselves. They try to fill in your silence, and in doing so, they expose their own insecurity. Here's what this means for you. Next time someone takes a public shot at you, don't smirk, don't flinch, don't defend, let them echo, let the group feel the tension. Because when you don't respond, you're not ignoring them, you're inviting them to unravel, and the longer they talk, the less powerful they look. In group settings, power isn't about having the last word, it's about having the last reaction. And sometimes, no reaction is the most powerful move you'll ever make. Online, the rules are different, but the game is the same. They don't call you out to understand you, they call you out to provoke you, to see if you'll crack. To watch you squirm under the heat of public pressure. One comment, one story post, one tweet that twists your words just enough to turn perception against you. And you feel it, that itch to respond, to correct the record, to clear your name. But that's the trap, because the second you do, you've entered their arena, and in their arena, truth doesn't matter, only reaction does. Cade never played that game. He once went silent for a full week. After a journalist accused him of orchestrating a corporate blackout, he didn't tweet, didn't post a statement, didn't return a single call. What did he do? He waited, and when he reappeared, he posted just one sentence. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. No names, no defense, just power. Framed, and instantly the narrative changed. The comment section turned, because now it wasn't about the accusation. It was about why they feared him enough to make it. This is the tactic. You don't explain. You distort, you take the energy they throw at you, and you reflect it back into the crowd. Let them wonder why you're so calm, why you didn't flinch, why you said just enough to make people question everything. It's not about proving innocence, it's about creating doubt in the minds of the accusers. You want to look dangerous, don't argue, be still, and when you do speak, speak like someone who doesn't need the room to agree. Here's how you win the digital arena. 3 moves: silence, redirection, precision. Someone calls you toxic. Say, the people fear what they don't understand, then disappear again. Someone says you're fake. Say, authenticity is often punished by those who lost their own, then go silent. You're not defending, you're reframing, you're planting a question in the audience's mind, one that doesn't have an answer, only tension. And that tension makes them watch longer, scroll slower, whisper your name in places you'll never hear. Because now, you're not just controlling your narrative, you've become the story they can't stop telling, even when you say nothing at all. There's a deeper level to this game. It's not just about silence, it's about disappearance. Someone throws a shot at you, not a direct hit, but a shadow jab, a vague comment, a passive dig. They're testing you, waiting to see if you'll react, waiting to see if you'll flinch, but you don't. You don't reply, you don't acknowledge, you don't even block them. You let your absence echo, and what happens next is inevitable. They spiral, because the average person, even in conflict, relies on emotional validation. They need a response, a ripple, a sign that they still have reach. So when you give them nothing, they drown in the silence. They post again, talk to others, try to bait you one more time, and every time they do, they look smaller, you look stronger, not because you fought, but because you never showed up to the battle. Cade once disappeared for months after a heated fallout with a major client. No messages, no interviews, not even a rumor. By the time he returned, the narrative had already shifted. The client looked erratic, desperate. He looked composed. That's the move. Stillness isn't the end. It's the prelude to invisibility. You don't ghost them out of fear. You vanish by design. so they can feel your silence, so they sit alone with their words and start questioning their tone, their judgment, their behavior, because silence is the trigger, but absence is the mirror, and the mirror always breaks the ones who need to be seen the most. This is what most people never understand. Control isn't about making the loudest noise. It's about removing your presence until it becomes unbearable, and in that space, the people who once tried to own your image start collapsing inside the void you left behind, not because you did anything, but because you didn't. And that was the loudest move of all. Let's take it further. Not only do you ignore the accusation, you flip it. They say you're arrogant. You say, strange how confidence makes people uncomfortable. They say you're manipulative. You say, only people who can't be influenced say that. Oh, they say you're fake. You say, everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. What just happened? You didn't defend. You didn't explain. You inverted. You turned their emotional swing into your stance. You used their force to highlight their weakness. This isn't retaliation, it's precision, because now they're scrambling. They're on their heels, trying to justify themselves. You made them carry their own accusation, and in doing so, you made them reveal more than they intended. Cade used to call this the turn of the blade. You don't block the sword. You let them fall into their own swing. You want to watch someone lose control. Give them nothing to hit. And then, just when they think they've drawn blood, remind them, gently, that they've only wounded their own frame. Because the person who accuses from emotion wants a show. They want you to squirm, to react, to make them feel powerful by proving them right. But when you stay calm, when your voice is level, when your eyes don't blink, you force the room to shift its gaze. They stop watching the accusation. They start watching who holds the frame. And that is always the one who looks least affected. Remember this, every time you flip an attack with calm detachment, you send a signal, not just to the one speaking, but to everyone watching. You say, I don't beg for innocence. I don't chase perception. I redefine the moment without needing permission. And suddenly, you're no longer playing defense. You're setting the rules. This isn't about being cruel, it's about being untouchable, because when they realize that even their sharpest words can't cut you, they stop swinging, not out of grace, but out of fear and respect. Most people are obsessed with reputation. They think being liked equals power, that if they clear their name fast enough, they'll keep their position in the room. But that's a myth, a dangerous one. You don't need a good reputation. You need a strong one. A good reputation is delicate. It begs for approval. It tiptoes around a fence. Even when people don't understand you, the man with a good reputation gets questioned, challenged, mocked lightly, then watched closely to see how he reacts. But the man with a strong one, people hesitate. They choose their words carefully, because one wrong step could cost them. And that shift happens the moment you stop explaining yourself. When you hold your tongue, when you let accusations fall without resistance, you build something deeper than trust. You build fear. Not the kind that scares people away, the kind that makes them cautious, curious, quiet. Cade never needed to silence his critics. He made them feel silly for even speaking. At a private event in Manhattan, a rival tried to bait him publicly. A smug line about a power going to your head. Cade looked up, held his gaze, and said, "You're still speaking from the last time I ignored you." It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, it was final. Because power doesn't perform, it concludes. And the room felt it. From that moment on, no one took that rival seriously, not because Cade won an argument, but because he never needed one. This is what you aim for, not innocence, not sympathy, not constant clarity. You aim to be the kind of person whose silence weighs more than their words, because then people don't test you to understand you. They avoid testing you because they are unsure what silence might bring. That's not fear of harm. That's fear of exposure, and that's when your presence becomes a language of its own, no defense needed. No reply required, just stillness that turns noise into surrender. There's a point you reach where silence is no longer a tactic. It becomes your nature. You no longer pause because you're calculating. You pause because nothing outside of you shakes what's inside. And that's when power becomes effortless, not performative, not reactive, but presence, a presence so anchored, so deeply unbothered, that it changes the emotional temperature of every room you walk into. You've seen these people. They don't speak often, but when they do, the room quiets, not because of volume, but because of weight. Their words feel like decisions, their stillness feels like strategy, their silence feels like warning. That's where you're headed, because when you train yourself to stop defending, to stop correcting, to stop chasing clarity, you start to live in definition. You define the moment, you define how others treat you. You define the frame before anyone else gets the chance to shape it. And from that space, people stop arguing with you, they argue with themselves. They replay conversations, they watch your posture, they search your silence for meaning you never had to give. Cade used to say, a true strength isn't loud, it's the absence of need. When you no longer need to be right, they can't make you wrong. When you no longer need to be understood, their opinions shrink in relevance, and when your stillness speaks louder than any defense, you stop being someone they test, you become someone they prepare for. That's not just presence, that's aura. And aura cannot be taken. It is built by restraint, by holding the frame when everyone else breaks it. So from now on, you don't play defense, you live in design. You let your silence create space, you let your stillness define gravity, and one day, without trying, you'll look around and realize something powerful. They stopped coming for you, not because you proved them wrong, but because you made the price of being right too high to pay.